Hi, my name is Hector Duran, and this is my presentation for um, my Values and Systems class at Ottawa University for my Master's in Human Resources. This presentation is regards to the rise and fall of Theranos. Um, just to get started, through the course of history in regards to business ethics has always played a factor in how we initiate enterprise and ultimately succumb to success or failure. Theranos is one of those examples. They were a privately held health technology corporation that became infamous for claims to devise blood testing that only required small traces of blood samples. They would succumb to these assertions when the validity of their claims were challenged and found to be false, making the prime example of the challenged infrastructures. Their failure would not only leave an imprint in how corporate America required more accountability, but also provided significant challenges for energy claims of those individuals seeking to save money on elaborate and expensive testing while being able to provide them with the opportunity to treat their illnesses, according to Theranos, in a timely manner. Elizabeth Holmes, who founded the company based on an idea that was due to the loss of her uncle, or so she states. Her uncle passed away from cancer, and her mission in life was then set to find a way in which individuals could find what in fact made the mill in a more timely fashion, if you will. She developed this idea and also developed a machine called the Edison, in which the machine itself was supposed to test the blood sample in a timely, efficient manner and provide those results immediately. Um, Basically, it's ironic that she named it Edison because Edison has been known as an individual who often would invent things and would sell these inventions prior to making them even consumable, if you will. So, in essence, it is just kind of ironic. Anyways, fairness is defined by the text as a quality of being just, equitable, and impartial. Fairness clearly overlaps with the concepts of justice, equity, and equality. There are three fundamental elements that motivate people to be fair: equality, reciprocity, and optimization. Honesty refers to truthfulness or trustworthiness. To be honest is to tell the truth to be the best of your knowledge without hiding anything. Finally, integrity is one of the most important and often cited elements of virtue and refers to being whole, sound, and an unimpaired condition. Integrity is basically the global value that relates to all activities, not just business values. Integrity relates to product quality, open communication, transparency, and relationships. Um, One of the biggest issues that Theranos found themselves in was the fact that they were not very transparent, not only in how the machines work, but also through the evolution of their success, if you will. They weren't open with stakeholders, they weren't open with government officials, and in the end, they weren't open to being transparent to those individuals who were seeking to utilize this resource because of the cost effectiveness. The text further defines ethical issue as being a problem, situation, or opportunity that requires an individual, group, or organization to choose among several actions that must be evaluated as right or wrong, ethical or unethical. Theranos claims to have found a system which saved the masses money on laboratory costs. It would soon be challenged, and the construct of American capitalism would realize the powers of persuasion exist in a dream fabricated by fantasy with no real grounds to support the theories that Elizabeth Holmes was representing. After Theranos was accused of using traditional blood testing machines to run its tests instead of the company's Edison devices, with further allegations indicating the company's Edison machines were providing inaccurate results, the spiral downward would not only reflect fraud being committed on big business who was investing millions of dollars into Theranos, but also fraud on civilian Americans seeking affordable costs of lab testing that allowed them to not only save, but made them feel as if they had power in which to treat an illness quickly once it was determined positive by these results. Um, the underlying factor here was the fact that this company made these claims and um, almost preyed on the individuals that were seeking to save money and to save cost. Elizabeth Holmes, in her deception, um, never wanted to make it clear as to what the issue was with the Edison. Instead of putting resources towards trying to enhance or trying to make better, she and her president, Sonny, I can't even remember his last name. Let me look it up. Sonny Balwani, my apologies, in their claims stating that they were trying to enhance this form of blood testing. They were never clear to define how, in fact, this machine was able to do so. As a matter of fact, they were still going through the process of getting certified so that these blood tests were validated by actual results. We found through the Department of Justice that there was a great deal of marketing fraud that was imposed, and one of the reasons why they are currently in the process of indictment for defrauding the government as well as multiple stakeholders and as well as the public. Marketing fraud is defined by the text Farrell, Friedrich, and Farrell is the process of dishonesty creating, distributing, promoting, and pricing products. And an example of further potential legal and ethical issues when one first takes in the schemes behind Theranos. Now, there are many possible courses of action one might have been taken to ensure they were within ethical and legal standards. For instance, in January 2016, the CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, sent a letter to Theranos based on an inspection of one of its California labs in the fall of 2015, reporting that the facility did not comply with certificate requirements and performance standards and caused an immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety due to a test to determine the correct dose of the blood-thinning drug warfarin. It was at this time both Holmes and Balwani had the opportunity to not only provide complete transparency, but also initiate a plan to ensure that all assertions and claims being made by the company and their advances were maintained, and further guaranteed all measures were taken to return the company back on track on these statements respectively while implementing the use of the Edison. If this wasn't possible, then it was necessary to explore and further experiment would have been needed to enhance and modify the Edison. At the most basic level, companies have a responsibility to be profitable at an acceptable level to meet the objectives of stakeholders and create that value, but should never, ever compromise their integrity and falsify information to maintain their profit margins on the basis of dishonesty. Business ethics comprises organizational principle, values, and norms that may originate from individuals, organizational statements, or from the legal system that primarily guide individual and group behavior in business. These standards of business serve as specific and pervasive limitations for behavior that should not be violated within the course of a business transaction. Theranos would eventually succumb to further criminal investigation by federal prosecutors and the SEC for allegedly misleading investors and government officials about this technology and not fully disclosing the real issues, barriers, and deception and defrauding investors and government officials, making them believe the product was fully operational when it really wasn't ready to be used. In general, fraud is any purposeful communication that deceives, manipulates, or conceals facts in order to harm others. Fraud can be a crime, and convictions may result in fines, imprisonment, or both. In this case, Elizabeth Holmes did succumb to some of those fines. What was odd about this is she was fined, in which, and again, she fundraised $350 million from Safeway and Walgreens. These are two agencies that submitted $350 to $400 million each into retrofitting 800 locations. This is a company that was in its peak was worth $10 billion. So, with that said, Elizabeth ended up with what some would say was a slap on the hand. She was only required to pay back $500,000. She forfeited 19 million shares of the company stock, which at the end of the day didn't amount to anything because the company isn't worth anything. But she was, again, fined to pay. Her fine was $500,000, and at the same time, they were not allowed to operate any additional labs. And in the end, she was also mandated not to be able to be a CEO for the next 10 years. However, what I find quite appalling in all this, and this is just deviating a little bit from the actual slideshow. What I find appalling is here she was required, again, a woman who made millions of dollars off stakeholders and government officials, and essentially made millions of dollars, was only fined $500,000. On top of that, she was not able to or mandated to stay away from a leadership position in any public company for the next 10 years. My question then becomes, how was that fair to those individuals who were part of that lab experience, who were part of wanting to make those significant changes that Elizabeth Holmes had initially indicated were possible? These were people that were hired to come on board and make these things happen. They were left not only with unemployment. At the end of the day, everyone was let go. But on top of being unemployed, on top of having no further income, now you have something on your resume that you can't take away. So at the end of the day, Elizabeth Holmes is able to keep most of her money. But these are individuals who are left pretty much holding the consequences of her own deception. On top of that, we have the stakeholders that were out millions and millions of dollars, with Walgreens and Safeway, for instance, who gave in anywhere between $350 to $400 million to retrofit. And let's not forget, even though many of these individuals who were in class action lawsuits to obtain money back for these lab results and for these labs that were done, even the public who was defrauded was left there holding nothing at the end of the day. Despite the investors and government losses that were taken, the workforce really took the biggest blow. Theranos announced that it closed its laboratory. 40% of its workforce basically was let go October 2016. 41% was let go about 6-7 months later. On April 10th, the company laid off the majority of its workers to avoid bankruptcy. And at the end, the headcount was down to fewer than 25 employees after having 800 employees at its peak. At the end, Theranos did end up closing shop, and now are no longer in existence, and now they have a lot of legal backfall that they still have to answer for. Now, shared values among employees are the glue of successful management as well as business ethics programs. With the appropriate control systems in place, Theranos and other companies like Theranos have the ability to prosper and remain intact as an organization with measures that are upheld from the top down. Formal controls for business ethics include input controls such as proper selection of employees, effective ethics training, and strong structural systems as indicated by the text. Process controls includes management's commitment to the ethics program and the methods or systems for ethics evaluation. Output controls involves comparing standards with actual behavior. Taking all this information into account, one could surmise that Theranos and the company's administrators were more involved in maintaining the company's secrets as it pertained to the technology than it was in ensuring that there was great respect and dignity in how they did business. Or even that the machines were in fact operational, as well as the testing verified and validated by the measures needed to be taken by FDA. Their need to keep their technological advances a secret, despite having no real product that had been completely developed, took precedence over ensuring that transparency with stakeholders, government officials, employees, and the market-based customers were at its base. It can be greatly regarded that if Theranos, more specifically Holmes and Bhawani, had instituted an ethics program into their company along with ensuring controls were in place that were indicative of complete and total transparency as it related to the technology and how the company was run and how encouraging employees to act in the same capacity of ethics, the company would still be in operations today. As a CEO, the responsibility totally lies on this individual to ensure these programs exist, but more importantly, that measures are taken on a consistent basis to institute systems of auditing to measure ethical and social processes. An ethics audit is a systematic evaluation of organizational ethics programs and performance to determine its effectiveness. indicative of regular, complete, and undocumented measurements of compliance with the company's published policies and procedures. This audit provides a snapshot of the overall company's compliance to the agency's proposed and instituted ethical standards. Along with the ethics audit, a social audit can also be utilized to process, assess, and report back on the overall performance of the organization in fulfilling the economic, legal, ethical, and philanthropic responsibilities expected by its stakeholders. In essence, there was a shared responsibility by those working within the company and stakeholders, and especially those overseeing the day-to-day operations of the company at the very top, to ensure there were standards in place that held the company and anyone attached to the organization accountable to complete and total transparency. With the exception considered, with Steve Jobs and his staff worked tirelessly to ensure the system was fully operational when they created the next step systems. Theranos maintains they were doing the same in the overall development of the Edison machine, similar to what Steve Jobs had done when he created Next. However, their continued fundraising efforts in collaboration with companies like Walgreens and Safeways in spearheading the opening and implementation of health and wellness clinics devised to serve the underprivileged and underinsured individuals while selling the public on a market process that had yet to be developed to shine light on the misrepresentation and fraudulent practices at Theranos. Theranos and Holmes were essentially selling a product and process that had not come to fruition while using the current forms of blood testing, seemingly invading the truth while misleading its employing stakeholders, government officials, and its customer base. There's really an agency or an organization has to implement some form of measures and value-based programs that reflect the overall ethical standards of the company in place. This then becomes a necessity to ensure the company stays within the lines and is able to continue to achieve progress. Transparency is necessary to ensure that stakeholders are completely in the knowing, while it further nurtures a trust built on integrity and character. There can be measures taken to protect certain aspects of this technology, but never at the risk of harming the reputations of those involved within the organization, as well as the public at large. Stakeholder and political figures that Holmes aligned herself with in attempts to further fundraise activities placed themselves in great harm, never fully holding Holmes accountable in any way, despite the red flags that were presented. Frederick and Farrell state most firms are developing formal and informal mechanisms that affect interactive communication and transparency about issues associated with the risk of misconduct. It is important that leadership consider the greatest danger to their organization lies in not discovering any serious misconduct or illegal activities that may be lurking. These risks can lead to destructive behaviors that lead to complete obliteration of a company. In regards to Theranos, their Achilles heel was their need for secrecy, and it undermined the security of transparency. Ethics and values were of no regard, while the value of the dollar became more of the priority. While the case of Theranos remains in the court process, both legal and public opinion, one thing that cannot be debated is the intention of fraud. Ethics teaches us that anyone can be guilty of fraud, whether knowingly or unknowingly. It is the task of those in position of power that harbor the responsibility to shed a light on these dilemmas as they come up, even if it means having to start over and report these failures to the stakeholders involved. It's an obligation, according to Frederick and Farrell, to establish a system of checks and balances to ensure that compliance is being met and standards of ethics are put in place. At the most basic level, companies have a responsibility to be profitable at an acceptable level to meet the objectives of stakeholders and create value. Business ethics comprises organizational principles, values, and norms that may originate from individuals' organizational statements or from the legal system that primarily guide individual and group behavior in business. Principles are specific and pervasive boundaries for behavior that should not be violated. It can be determined based on the fall of Theranos in such a short period of time that Holmes nor her president had any regard for any shared principles, nor were they concerned for the stakeholders taking minimal victories that added to mostly nothing for the employees who worked tirelessly to make the product function as Holmes had guaranteed. Instead, in hiding these problems, they only increased these issues, made the problems worse, and worse for the company. but even more so for the workforce and those stakeholders they defrauded along the way. In the end, Theranos is, as stated in this presentation, no longer in existence. They still continue. Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani are still in the process of litigation, and I believe last report I read, Ms. Holmes was in the process of seeking some sort of plea deal. So I know that she's in the process with the legal system to achieve some sort of a plea agreement. So at this point, Theranos continues to find itself in hot water. But in the end, I think that it's become a very detailed learning lesson for us, for individuals who are in business administration or even in human resources, to see a company and its lack of transparency when addressing the public. I think it's imperative more than anything that if you are a business person and that you are, whether you're establishing a small business or you're running a big business enterprise, that you're fully aware of maintaining that sense of transparency, but always following the ideals of fairness, integrity, and honesty. I think that these are the three highly regarded values that should guide our principles in working in business and in any business. So with that said, this is the completion of my presentation. I do apologize for some of the disorganized thoughts, but I hope you enjoyed. If you have any further questions, please feel free to contact me. Have a good day.